Hey everyone, welcome to this week's bonus show, which is going to be the live Q&A at the recent live Gaslit Nation taping with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the historian and author of the best-selling book Strongman, Mussolini to the Present, and Russian mafia expert Olga Lautman of the Kremlin Files podcast. So these are questions from our wonderful audience who was there on an extremely stormy night. Like the time people had to leave their homes in New York City to come over to this bookstore on the Lower East Side, it was torrential rain. And people did that to come together and fight crime. And I want to thank you all so very much. It was such a thrill and honor to meet you all. And now here are the questions from our audience. But first, I want to just share some quick announcements. I got some things to say about Fox News because I recently had a conversation with someone who used to work at Fox News for many years, and I'm going to gloriously spill that tea for you because I think the insights are very valuable and it's stuff we all have to keep in mind, fighting like hell for our democracy going into 2024. So if you want that hot gossip, we're going to be sharing it live with you on Instagram at 4 p.m. next Thursday, which is, I'm checking my calendar live, October 5th. It's October 5th, Thursday at 4 p.m. on Instagram for Gaslit Nation. And also if you're on Patreon, if you don't have Instagram, but you have Patreon, we'll be live there too. So you could get us live on Patreon if you're part of that community and you subscribe to the show, or you can get it live on Instagram if you're there. So we'll do it live. I'll just share it live and then I'll take some questions and that will be the bonus for next week. That's October 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern. I hope you can make it. And I want to also recommend two extraordinary films that I've watched recently that are part of this larger theme of that we've been talking about on the show since the start, which is how do you know who to believe, what to believe in a time of rampant disinformation? The way you ground yourself in the truth is prioritizing the most vulnerable, the people who are most vulnerable, the people caught in the middle of all these forces we're up against. That's where you ground yourself. In the age of Fox News, in the far-right echo chamber, they're trying to dehumanize. It's all about dehumanization. So the way you combat disinformation is through humanizing the top stories of the day. And what is one of the top stories? Migrants, refugees, right? The big flood of brown people coming from the Middle East and Africa and from the southern border who are going to rape your daughter and have mixed race babies that are going to populate the earth and this big browning of the earth, right? That's the fear, the white genocide, the white replacement theory. That's literally what we are up against with Donald Trump basically being a shoo-in. The KKK Grand Wizard being a shoo-in for the Republican Party nominee in 2024. So to humanize this, for us to fight back with truth, I strongly urge you to watch these two films. They are powerful. They will stay with you. They will make you more informed. They'll give you x-ray vision for when it comes to the news. The first one is a drama, meaning it's dramatized. They're actors. It's based on a screenplay, but it's based on it was made from a screenplay, but it's based on a true story. It's called The Swimmers. It's based on an extraordinary true story of these two Syrian sisters who were competing to go to the Olympics, represent Syria in the Olympics, when the Syrian war broke out. And they decided to take the dangerous journey crossing the sea to Europe, crossing the Mediterranean Sea in a raft, barely surviving. Many people do not, and they wash up ashore. They drown at sea. They took that journey and they rebuilt their lives as refugees in Germany and went on to compete in the Olympics. You have to watch this film. It shows you why and how people would gamble with their lives to cross the Mediterranean Sea. It puts a human face on the refugee crisis, which is only going to get worse with the climate crisis. So please, please, please watch that film. It's powerful. It humanizes this issue, and there's a lot of Rihanna in it. There's a lot of dancing, and the early scenes capture very well what it is like to be in an authoritarian regime, what it's like to be walking around in an authoritarian country where life still goes on. People still go dance to Rihanna in the club, but then you have soldiers everywhere, and some of them will try to molest you and so on. And it also gives insight of what it's like to be in a country that is being invaded. The times I've been in Ukraine after Russia's invasion, there's this weird feeling of, you're at a bar, you're at a club, you're at a restaurant, and then a big truck carrying giant missiles goes by. Just a surreal feeling. So especially the early scenes capture very much that feeling of being an authoritarian country or a country at war. And the later scenes of the harrowing journey trying to make it into Europe. Everyone needs to watch that. It will stay with you forever. And the second film I strongly urge you to watch, and the filmmakers are going to be featured in an upcoming episode. It's a documentary, a Peabody Award-winning documentary called Missing in Brooks County, about the deliberately cruel, deliberately mass murdering border crossing engineered under President Bill Clinton, which was, so basically under Clinton, operations were put in place to try to funnel refugees to cross over the most dangerous terrain possible. And this has led to mass deaths, essentially state-engineered mass murder. And also the film talks a lot about how there are these dystopian militarized checkpoints well within the countries on the southern border. Not just on the border, but well within the countries. I first heard about these militarized checkpoints while phone banking to get out the vote in Arizona. One of the voters I spoke with told me about this, described them to me. And so that's why I'm always saying to our listeners, if you please phone bank, not just to get out the vote, but to learn different things, to get invaluable insights into what's going on in various parts of your country. So definitely phone bank for that reason. Definitely phone bank to fight for your democracy, fight for your country, fight for your children's future, and also to go on a bit of a tourist tour of people's lives in other pockets of our country. It's really quite extraordinary. So that film, Missing in Brooks County, the filmmakers will be on the show. They walked through some common sense solutions on how to fix the border crisis. Right now, the border crisis is intentionally engineered for max cruelty. It's ran by wannabe cowboys, wannabe militias, a bunch of meatheads, when really what needs to come in are a bunch of good managers and smart, transparent systems and a policy of humanity that would actually make the American government money and raise tax revenue. So for instance, one of the filmmakers mentioned a solution of, if these refugees are coming to the border and they're escaping unimaginable violence, unimaginable terror, countries where you can't even fix up your front porch that's broken because that would alert the local crime gangs, the local mafia that you have money, and then they'll kidnap someone in your family, hold them for ransom and torture them, kill them, and you might not see them again because they're shaking you down. That's what it's like to live in some of these countries where they're full-blown violent mafia states, or there's a widespread famine engineered by a Russian-backed dictatorship like in Venezuela and so on. And so what these desperate people are trying to do is they will give money to a coyote, a smuggler. So why not just have that money that they would otherwise give to a smuggler be used as a bond on the border, and then they're allowed to come into the United States. They're given a work visa so they can go straight to work, and they won't have any fear, and they will then be lawfully obligated to pay their taxes, being here on a work visa, and that raises tax revenue. That fills one of the 9 million available jobs right now, and so on. And they're allowed to go back and forth, go back home, deliver money and so on, and have basically a border like in the European Union, right? And I know the Fox News hooligans are going to pull their eyeballs out and be like, oh my gosh, look at this hairy feminist lefty with a podcast saying that they want open borders. But by having open borders, somebody needs to say it. Somebody needs to normalize this, because it really is financially in the U.S.'s best interest. And not only that, it stops the state-engineered mass murder on our border, which has been called by the United Nations the deadliest border crossing in the world. It is done by design. It is essentially a genocide of refugees going on there, built by white supremacy, the same white supremacy that established slavery, that established Jim Crow, which literally informed the Nazi regime on how to create a legal structure for genocide. That is what the southern border crisis really is. So please watch these two films to understand and really sort of hold space in your heart for the human side of some of the biggest news stories in the world, and that is the refugee crisis, which are on our southern border and in Europe, and they're only going to get worse with the climate crisis, displacing even more people. So the more we understand that it's us out there, it's our children, it's our grandparents who came to this country, and so on and so on. The more we see ourselves in these people, the more we can enact common sense solutions to help them and build and factor in greater stability in our structures. And not only that, come up with a win-win situation for everyone. Mass murder, the status quo, that's not an inevitable solution. That's one that's deliberately chosen for max cruelty. And now that needs to be undone. And we need public officials with moral courage to help us with that cultural shift, help us rethink things and normalize a more common sense system that keeps people alive and keeps families together. So please watch these two films, The Swimmers and Missing in Brooks County. Now, without further ado, here is Olga Lautman kicking off the Q&A of the recent live taping of Gaslit Nation featuring Ruth and Olga. And if you want to join me for some fun Fox News bashing, I'll be on Instagram Live at 4 p.m. on Thursday, October 5th, and also on Patreon streaming live, and so you can ask questions there. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. If you're hearing this voice, you can get me on video on YouTube. You can see where I've had to reapply my makeup after crying after watching The Swimmers, okay? So you can see this video over on YouTube, the first 10 minutes, and the rest is just audio only. And thank you all for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.
So the question was for the recording, Prigozhin is dead. Yay! And Kadyrov maybe sick, dying. Do you see that as Putin weakening?
This is actually a tough one because the day everything happened with Prigozhin, my phone was blowing up from media trying to get an answer.
Celebration text.
No, I have a very different view. I personally am still hesitant as to whether Prigozhin is dead. I mean, I just cannot picture him and Utkin and the whole top leadership of Wagner getting on a plane in Moscow, knowing the threat to them. And I mean, Utkin, who is the real founder of Wagner, he's a lieutenant colonel for GRU, so he's had the best training. Plus, they've toppled governments in Africa. It's yet to be seen, but when you look at the bigger scale, yes. In September of last year, when Prigozhin publicly started attacking Russia's defense ministry, going after the defense minister, joint chiefs, this one, that one, and pretty much going after the elite, the oligarchs, you saw the fractures growing. And these fractures continued growing and growing and growing. And what it demonstrated was not that Prigozhin, because in Russia you can't just open your mouth and decide to, I mean, the things that he was saying would have had anybody executed in normal time. What it did demonstrate is that he had cover from people within intelligence services, within the Ministry of Defense, and frankly around Putin's inner circle. And Putin doesn't know which one of the people he might be looking at every day is the traitor, in his eyes, would be the traitor who assisted Prigozhin. So it showed that there was a fracturing there. And there were many fractures that have been happening between ethnicities inside of Russia. So you see every month it's weakening and weakening and weakening. With Kadyrov, again, that's another one because this is Russia and they're like a house of cards. There are rumors he's dead, but he did the same thing a few months ago. And what Russian leaders are known to do is to put out rumors that they're dead or sick or surgery or whatever to see if there are any movements around of people trying to take power. So for all we know, that is what it could be happening. Apparently then he taped the video, walking through the rain and saying that, no, I'm not dead, and, here I am. We don't know, but regardless, for them, it's like with Trump. The more Trump has to try, the less weaker he is. The more if they had things under control, we wouldn't be seeing this. And honestly, obviously, I speak Russian and follow, all their media and Telegram. And like I joke because during the Soviet Union, the CIA and MI6 would do anything to get a peek of inside of what was happening. Now all they have to do is go on Telegram and you just see this huge shit show and everyone fighting. And as long as it continues, it's going to get worse. And the way it's going to escalate is by Ukraine continuing to win, because that's how it started when Ukraine had a successful counteroffensive last year. Russia was humiliated, the nationalists were humiliated, and then you saw these fractures growing and growing and growing.